Welcome to the John Cady Podcast. I'm John Cady, U.S. Navy retired, former minister. We're going to take a break from all the crazy stuff that's been on the news over the last few days, and I'm going to talk about something that's very near and dear to me, something that's been on my heart and mind ever since I was a teenager. Back when I was a teenager, there were places called music stores that sold records, vinyl records. Most people under the age of 30 probably have seen maybe a few of them in a select vinyl section in their store, but before streaming, before CDs even, everything was on vinyl. You had sections of vinyl albums, and then you had the 45 RPM section. On the 45 RPM section, you had the hit single on one side, and there was the B side. Take the record home after you made the purchase, you play the A side, the hit single. But then, once you flip that record over, and sometimes we come across the B side that sounds better than what the A side was, it makes me wonder, well, why wasn't this the hit single? It's much better than what was actually released. Who knows? Maybe that could have propelled that one on the charts. I'm going to talk about a few of my favorite B-sides, and maybe those who listen and follow my channel will pick up on it, maybe have an idea and talk about some of their own. I'll kick this off with Bob Seger. Bob Seger is a music legend, and there are two very well-known B-sides that were played on my hometown radio station. The first one was Sunspot Baby. Sunspot Baby was the B-side to his 1979 hit, Old Time Rock and Roll. Old Time Rock and Roll made the top 40 and eventually appeared on the Tom Cruise movie Risky Business. One of the DJs at my hometown station, Bill Kugel, flipped it over and he played what he thought was Old Time Rock and Roll, but instead it was Sunspot Baby. Sunspot Baby is a classic Bob Seger tale of heartbreak and breakup, and it became a top request item and a staple of my hometown station's format for the remainder of the time that I was growing up in Fairmont. His other B-side was Long Twin Silver Line, which was from his album Stranger in Town, and it was the B-side of Fire Lake. Now, Fire Lake was a pretty decent song, and it did hit the top 10, but Long Twin Silver Line, oh my goodness. You cranked that rascal up, and it was a solid Bob Seger jam from start to finish. There's no way that I could listen to that and without thinking, Seger should have released this one as a single too, because it was that good. Some of the more obscure artists that a lot of people haven't heard of, I touched on them in a previous podcast, and I'll bring them up again. The Motors. The Motors were a punk rock band or pub rock band, depending on which genre you prefer, from the UK. When their song Forget About You was starting to make headway, and it did find some airplay here in the United States, even though it didn't hit the Hot 100, I bought a copy of Forget About You, flipped it over, and then there was the song Breathless. Breathless, in my opinion, was a much better and much more solid piece of music than what the A-side was. It ranked up there with another Motors song, Dancing the Night Away, which was another classic. That jam was so good and so solid, I played that record to death. I literally wore the grooves off of that. It was that good. It is one of my favorite punk and new wave songs of that era when I was in high school. I would highly recommend listening to the Motors, and especially listening to that particular song. One of my other favorite bands, The Sweet, had several B-sides that I thought were much better and more enjoyable than what the A-sides were, and that's saying something because the Sweet had very good A-sides too. Their 1974 single Ballroom Blitz, flip it over, and on the B-side was Restless. And Restless was an awesome jam. And it was a departure from what they did for their hits. A lot of their hit songs at that time were written by Mike Chapman and Nicky Chinn, but on the B-side was stuff that the Sweet wrote themselves. In this case, Restless was right up there with Ballroom Blitz, if not even better. I couldn't get enough of it. Fast forward a few years, 1978 rolls around. Love Is Like Oxygen was the A-side. It was a top 10 hit, just like Ballroom Blitz was. Flip It Over, and at the time it wasn't released on any of their albums, but the song Cover Girl, oh, here we go again. These guys were on fire. I just couldn't get enough of it. And I played the grooves off of that one too. Finally, many years later, the Sweet were able to put that on one of their greatest hits compilations, which I think did the band justice because Cover Girl ranks up there with all their other good stuff. And again, this is another one that I highly recommend if you haven't listened to them. In fact, I would highly recommend listening to The Sweet, period, because they're one of those bands that deserve to be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and why they're not in blows my mind. Oh, this is a good one. I'm having fun with this. The Babies, Headfirst. Headfirst was the B-side of their top 20 hit, Every Time I Think of You. Every Time I Think of You was a good pop song, and it did well, but Flip It Over, Headfirst, oh, that was a straight-up kickin' jam. It deserved to do much better when it was finally released as a single on its own. And thankfully, some of the classic rock stations do remember that the Babies existed as a band. John Waite was popular before he went solo. Headfirst definitely deserved to be a much bigger hit than it was. It was low in the Hot 100, but it definitely deserved a better position than what it got. The Records, a British rock and roll band. They were popular in some of the new wave circles in the late 70s and early 80s. They had one medium successful hit here in the States with Starry Eyes, and Starry Eyes was great. It was a great song, but flip that one over. The song Paint Her Face was on the B-side. Paint Her Face is an unsung gem among B-sides. I would again highly recommend listening to this. If you're going to listen to anything by the Records, you've got to listen to Paint Her Face as well as any of the hits they released over the years. And I'm going to close on this one. Paul McCartney. Paul McCartney had a top 40 hit, I've Had Enough. It actually made it into the top 20 or top 25. But the B-side, oh, it was just killer. It was definitely one of Paul McCartney's best compositions. And why he didn't release this as a single, again, this is another mind-blowing one. Deliver Your Children. Deliver Your Children had a more folk rock feel to it, but it certainly was one of Paul McCartney's best. Why it didn't get released as a single instead of I've Had Enough, again, a topic for another day. But hey, the B-side was awesome. And that's just a few of them. There are many other wonderful B-sides out there, and if you know people who have 45 RPM records and are willing to play them, ask them about that, because there's a lot of hidden musical treasure out there that radio stations often forget exist. This is John Cady. I hope you've enjoyed this podcast as much as I have today. If you like the content, hit like, hit subscribe, and I'll certainly catch you on the next one.